Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Awesome. Welcome everyone to Defend for this Friday. It's rainy here up in Northwest Arkansas, and I think in most of Arkansas is getting rain today. But we have a nice little break in the day for an exciting Defend session. So today we're going to have a guest speaker, Dr. Davis, who I'll introduce in a second, who will be talking about implementing and evaluating health behavior changes. So just some Defend reminders. Again, we still have our personalized coaching sessions each week. Mondays are our behavior change coaching with Danielle. Nutrition is on Tuesdays with Jamie, and physical activity and exercises on Thursdays with Bryce. So again, if you have any personalized questions, you want some tips about what you've been learning about in the Defend sessions, these are great resources that are free to everyone who participates in Defend. The challenge for this week is a physical activity challenge. Yay, my favorite. And we want you to try and get at least 30 minutes of physical activity every day. And so this can be simple as walking, gardening. If you do go to the gym, that counts too. Things like dancing in your living room also count. There's a lot of outdoor things to do now as the weather gets nicer. So share with us how you met those 30 minutes each day on Facebook or email it to us as your weekly challenge. This week, we'll have some more demos posted. Remember, they're all on our YouTube channel, so there's lots of specific topics, both on physical activity and nutrition to check out, as well as our fast facts. We're going to be adding some fun recipes for summer with all the fresh fruits and vegetables that are available. And so now on to our guest speaker for today. I'm excited to introduce Dr. Robert Davis, or Bob Davis. He's an assistant professor in our public health program, which is in our Department of Health, Human Performance, and Recreation. He's also the director of the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Lab. His education, he got his PhD at the University of Mississippi. So he's been here for 3 years, 4 years, something like that. We're done with 3, on to number 4, something like that. But Dr. Davis is really a behavior change expert. Behavioral theory is one of his areas of expertise. Although substance abuse really is his main kind of domain of interest, he collaborates with lots of other people, from physical activity to even some vet schools, I know. So he's a great example of how we can apply some of these behavior change theories and techniques to all different types of behaviors. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Davis, and stop sharing my screen.
All right, thank you, Erin. I will try to figure out how to share my screen and get started. All right. Okay, is everybody seeing the slideshow here?
I see your Explorer window.
Oh no. It's amazing how I've taught class using this technology for a semester and can't figure it out.
It's the pressure.
There's so much pressure. Here we go. How about that?
Yes, so we see your PDF slides.
All right, so I wasn't sure exactly the needs of the audience. So this is geared more towards individual level initiation and evaluation, self-evaluation of behavior change and behavior modification. So appreciate you all inviting me and coming out so we can just get started here. All right. At any time, if something doesn't seem right or I'm talking about something that I'm not hitting change or something, just someone speak up and interrupt me and we'll get back on track. But just to put a few things in context that apply to what we're going to talk about, we're going to define just kind of the way we view a few things here. So health in general, we're viewing not really as the absence of disease anymore, and we've kind of progressed towards an idea of wellness where our wellness is basically dictated by these various domains of health. So things like physical health, social health, spiritual health, psychological health, etc. So viewing health in this way kind of highlights the understanding that health behavior is not strictly things like taking my medication, for example. It could be things as simple as reducing stress by balancing my checkbook, something we don't really do that much anymore, but budgeting, having date night, those things that are going to increase the relationships that I have with others and strengthen my overall psychological health. Health behavior, we're looking at actions that are either deleterious or geared towards improving our health. And from a health behavior science standpoint, we like to kind of think about health behavior as more than just the overt, acute action, but also those kind of psychological and affective things that both serve as antecedents to behavior change, but also are impacted or there's some ramification or augmenting of those factors resulting after engaging in particular behaviors. And then health behavior change, we're focused here thinking about not only modifying existing behavior or ceasing existing behavior, but also initiating new behaviors like starting an exercise regimen or something like that, or seeking help to deal with some psychological problem. So health behavior is very complex. Health behaviors are very diverse. As we just mentioned, a few specific behaviors, something like washing my hands, which has become an interest again recently. The COVID pandemic, we've now introduced new reinforcing factors socially and everything else to increase hand washing specific to a purpose of reducing transmission of COVID-19, but also balancing our checkbook, quitting smoking, escaping opioid addiction. These are all very complex things, and the level of complexity varies between behavior. Some require more resources, skills, knowledge, etc. to execute. Also, sometimes the complexity of behavior is not solely predicated on the behavior itself, but more the environmental context where the behavior occurs. Thinking about initiating a physical activity regimen, if I am a student who has access to the health center on campus here, that's removal of a lot of barriers, much less complex than somebody living in rural Arkansas, perhaps, where you have no resources. Maybe there is a gym, but then you have to also pay, so additional barriers. So the nature of the complexity of behavior doesn't really rest solely on the behavior of interest. So with that said, it's very difficult to discuss one size fits all behavior modification strategy. So what I've tried to do for this talk is put together a couple of things that could serve as basically tips to increase the likelihood or potential for success in your attempts to modify or change or alter your behavior. And those are going to be things that we see consistently associated empirically with successful behavior change across and being applied to a variety of health behavioral theory. And exactly or specifically, the first tip is going to be increasing our understanding or increasing our knowledge base on the behavior change in question, understanding and expanding our motives for behavior change, and then cultivating and focusing on our environment and trying to structure that in a way that facilitates our success in initiating or maintaining our behavior change. So with the idea of educating ourselves and increasing our knowledge base, it's incredibly important to take ownership, be autonomous in what you're doing, try to increase your knowledge base, because knowledge is absolutely necessary. We have to understand what we need to do. The caveat being that it is also insufficient on its own, but it is a pivotal element for behavior change. It's applied as constructs across various behavioral theories, from social cognitive theory to information, motivation, behavioral skills models, etc. We really focus on this, and from an intervention standpoint, we always see education as a component. And what we're doing here today, providing information and education to increase the likelihood of behavior change. And this is just a pivotal element for successful change. So research continually supports the notion that people who actively engage in trying to increase their consciousness or increase their knowledge on their intended behavior change are going to be more successful, are going to increase the likelihood of successful behavior change. Why is that? Well, some things that we might get from this process, a couple of things, and this is not an inclusive list, but just some examples. Developing a better understanding of the outcome expectations regarding or related to the behavior. Behavioral theory suggests that our behavior is predicated on actions that serve to meet some specific coveted outcome. If there's nothing good that's going to happen, then I'm unlikely to take action. So developing a better understanding of the outcomes associated with the behavior change of interest is going to be useful. Ultimately, we're talking about health behavior. So ideally, we have this expectation that it's going to make me healthier, but that's not the only good thing that we can get. We have this thing, if we're focused on reducing our cholesterol level, that's a great thing. And we believe that that will happen as a result of behavior. But there are so many other things, other benefits. If we're exercising to reduce our cholesterol, we're also getting psychological benefits. There can be social benefits. There can be a host of things that we learn as we increase our understanding. And then also we're going to uncover things like negative outcomes and know what to expect that could possibly not be good. And that can help us better plan and prepare for things that might pop up that could, inhibit our behavioral maintenance, such, if we're taking medication to alleviate or reduce our risk for some health concern, then there's usually side effects, right? We need to know and be able to understand what's going to happen so that we see it coming and it doesn't derail us from our behavior change. Sometimes we need a certain amount of behavior to achieve health-related benefits. So increasing our understanding of what's needed. So with physical activity, for example, there's a lot of research that would show, meeting guidelines will get us to a point where we're going to be experiencing health-related benefits. So we need to know what those things are, and that can help us plan and set our goals for initiating and action. Learning physically how to perform behavior is going to also be a byproduct of increasing our knowledge. We can also learn about resources that could be available to support our change. If, for instance, if we're trying to quit smoking, say we Google smoking cessation, one of the many things that's going to come up there is a list of localized resources and places that we can go to find counseling or therapy or other mechanisms to help support our change. Additionally, a lot of times there are multiple solutions, behavioral solutions to health issues. So a lot of times our health behavior is prompted by some cue to action. Oftentimes that can stem from a doctor's appointment where they uncover a risk factor such as really high blood pressure or something like that. And now we need to do something about it. So, thinking about that, what can we do about it? Well, there's medication as an option. There's dietary augmentation as an option. There's physical activity as an option. All of those things could be utilized. Literature would suggest that we should probably focus on a single behavior change at a time rather than incorporating multiple behavior changes in order to make sure that we actually succeed. We don't want to cause an incredible shift in our whole, lifestyle at one time, because that could set us up for failure. So it's important to think about those kinds of things and develop success in a single behavior change at one time and then move on to the others. We think about self-efficacy and how that could be increased. Our self-efficacy to act could be increased by achievement. So if we focus on things, specific behaviors that are highly under our own control and don't require a whole lot of external reinforcement to engage in, that's probably the direction we should go with our behavior change when we have multiple behaviors that could potentially resolve our health-related issue. And places that we can go to find information are going to be typically the internet now is our go-to, right? But doctors, content experts, journals, websites, books, all of these things are available to help us increase our understanding of the factors related to our behavior change. Looking and reading blogs even is a great way to understand and learn vicariously through people who have gone through this process before, because I guarantee you there's a million people out there who are struggling with the same issue and trying to institute the same changes. So understanding the things that have come up in their lives as barriers or problems that they encountered in their road to behavior change can be useful for us. So increasing knowledge, educate yourself. Also, next, generating momentum for change is going to be critical. So it's important to examine and understand our motives for change and then try to expand upon those motives for change. So Thinking about where is the source of our motivation coming from is going to be important. Is it an internal thing, an intrinsic source of motivation, or is it an extrinsic or external source of motivation, or the reason behind why we're trying to change our behavior? For example, thinking about something like smoking cessation, thinking about whether is this something that I've come to on my own and I want to do this versus I have to sign a document to reduce the premium on my insurance through my employer. If that's the only reason, then I'm probably going to run into problems initiating as well as maintaining the sustainability of my behavior change is going to be affected, and it's going to be different based on those motives. So if I have a highly extrinsic source of motivation, it's going to be really important for me to try to tie this into something important to me personally, to develop a personal motivation for change. We like to view motivation basically on a continuum where we have completely external source of motivation in the way of punishment or reward, and that's the only reason we're acting, versus the other side, being anchored by I really enjoy this. And somewhere in between those two extremes, we have a host of different sources of motives. But the goal should be to tilt the scale or swing the needle back towards intrinsic motivation, because then we're acting autonomously and we're going to receive intrinsic gratification for this behavior, and then that can serve to motivate us to act and sustain our action. So ways that we can think, about sources of positive gains that we can get is going to be reflecting, thinking, looking back, what all am I going to get out of this process? And we do this all the time, and we also see this process or this idea of benefits and barriers or pros and cons, mental math or decisional balance. Some of these behavioral theories refer to this concept of kind of weighing pros and cons in different ways, but we see this concept consistent across behavioral theory. I'm going to get something, I'm going to give something up as a way or as a result of changing my behavior. And if the benefits outweigh the barriers or the pros outweigh the cons, I should be more likely to engage or change my behavior successfully. So we really want to stagger this towards the benefits, and we really want to examine and understand what are all the benefits. Obviously, there's a health-related benefit as far as reducing my risk for whatever condition I'm thinking about or whatever my behavior is linked to. But there's going to be other things that potentially are seen as benefits as well. And reflecting and really questioning the complete nature of the behavior change is going to be important. Some things to consider to increase the amount of benefits are going to be things like, how does my behavior align with my self-identity or my self-concept or who I see myself to be? Because this is going to really highlight some ways that I can effectively, emotionally, and psychologically identify benefits here. If I'm seeing myself as a healthy individual, I exercise, I eat right, but I use tobacco. Well, there's something that is conflicting with who I see myself to be in this scenario. So I need to identify the fact that if I remove this from my environment, I'm now going to remove this element of cognitive dissonance and be a more happy individual. I'm going to receive psychological and intrinsic gratification from this. Other ways to think about behavior change and the benefits associated with that are going to be to look at the impact of your behavior on others and the impact of your behavior on the physical environment. Think about the ways that your behavior affects those around you, whether it's diet, whether it's smoking, whether it's physical activity, whether it's excessive alcohol use, whatever the behavioral modification is. We need to examine that and reflect on how it affects our family and our friends and community members. Thinking about our children, if we're smoking, obviously we're exposing them to smoke, which is going to be harmful, environmental smoke, which could increase their likelihood of some sort of adverse health reaction. But we're also setting, behavioral patterns in place and showing normative behavior. My smoking is acceptable and I do this, and my children are being developed in this environment and learning from it. And obviously my behavior of smoking is drastically increasing the likelihood that they themselves would start smoking. So removing this is going to have such a psychological benefit. In addition to also reducing your risk for lung cancer or other sorts of diseases. So identifying the impact of your behavior on others around you is crucial. in helping you see and expand this list of benefits. And it's not a bad idea to create this list of benefits and map these things out so that you actually have some tangible thing to look at and to serve as motivation there. Create that affective association between your behavior and the impact that it has on others, and that will serve to motivate you. The third tip is cultivate an environment that facilitates your success. So behavioral theory, behavioral science, I can't describe the weight of the environment here on why we do what we do, why we think what we do. We are developed in a social context. Everything that we become is the product of the influence of the environment around us, as well as our own adaptation to that environment. So ignoring the environment is going to set you up for failure. We need to structure our environment to facilitate what we want. B.F. Skinner, one of my favorite psychologists ever, he said we should, the goal of any society should be to structure our environment so that it facilitates the greatest possible achievement, the greatest possible success, and the greatest possible affirmation of the people who reside in it. To the greatest extent we're capable of, we should take that logic and do so for ourselves as well. Create the environment that fosters your success. And a couple of key ways that we can do that, and we see, consistent across behaviors and across behavioral theory as well, as incorporation of some of these factors, like cultivating social support, cultivating helping relationships. There are people who will help you go through behavior change and will help to support you through that change. Finding those people is going to be pivotal. They're going to offer companionship. They're going to offer accountability, emotional support, tangible forms of support, etc., that can help you meet your goals. And again, I promise, there's millions of people going through the same process as you. We hear terms like find your people or find your tribe. It's easy in the age we live in now with so much technology and social media to find people who are in a similar position as you and can serve to help you and serve as companions and work through things with you and together. We're social beings as humans. And we really have this desire and an innate need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And it really is helpful to have that source of support. It can be helpful to make your commitment to change known to the people within your support group. And we see this, as simple as just making a formal declaration of your intent is empirically associated with increased likelihood of engaging in action and initiating this behavior change. Another really important thing, hugely important, is to control the stimuli in your environment. We need to control the stimuli for both wanted and unwanted behaviors. So examples of how we might do this: if I'm trying to alter my diet, if I want to reduce the amount of empty calories I'm consuming, I should not put a gallon of ice cream in my freezer. I should remove this from my environment. I need to remove the cookie jar from my environment. If I'm trying to quit smoking, I need to remove the ashtrays. I need to remove the other things that would stimulate me to experience a craving, for example. I need to possibly, if I'm trying to reduce my alcohol consumption, I shouldn't be going on the same path to work or home from work every day where I used to stop by the liquor store every day on my way home, because that's going to create a stimulus that I will likely respond to. So I need to control the stimuli within my environment, and also use stimulus to prompt good things, prompt the behavior I want, prompt positive affect or emotion related to the behavior I want to engage in. I can place a picture of my daughter, Ellie, on the back porch of my house where I used to go to smoke. If I don't smoke, but if I did, I'd probably go out on the back porch. But I can do that, and that can stimulate the positive association that I have to this cessation attempt, because I'm doing it for her and her health as well as my own. Those types of things. I can keep the running shoes out by the door, and I see that, and it visually stimulates the need to go out and engage in the physical activity that I want to engage in. And again, it's going to be important to create that and understand the things in your environment that do stimulate responses. So reflect and examine what are the things that have led to cravings or relapses into sedentary behavior, or a lapse in my behavior where I just got off totally derailed for a week or something like that, and really evaluate and examine those things so that you know what it is that's going to trigger you. Next, the idea of social liberation is consistent also in many theory, and we see this. There are things in our environments that will facilitate the goals that we have and what it is that we're trying to do. So we need to look for these factors that serve to liberate you from an undesirable behavior, or that will help you to engage or initiate that new behavior of exercising regularly, for example, or something like that. Some examples of things that could serve as socially liberating mechanisms could be, smoking bans. So those are environmental aspects that will help reduce the likelihood of or increase the likelihood that you can cease your smoking behavior. Exercise classes being offered, find out where they are, join them. Trying to reduce calorie content, trying to eat healthier. Well, many restaurants and even on campus now, we have places that are giving calorie contents that are showing me and helping me to make the wise decision to meet my goal of eating a healthier diet. So finding those things is going to be very important, and using them as resources to facilitate your change. So moving on into some tips related to evaluating health behavior change. And again, this is more on the individual level as opposed to how we would actually kind of do this from an intervention standpoint. But being able to set goals is huge. We can't talk about self-monitoring and evaluating without having established goals. And then also the monitoring process, self-monitoring, reflecting and refining our approach, and then also being able to reinforce ourselves is going to be huge. So looking at goals, most of us have seen this idea of SMART goals. Has been around for a long time, and the degree to which the individual actually does this objectively, explicitly, in great detail is going to vary widely. But the point needs to be that we have some specific target in mind that we're shooting for, because this provides the foundation for our ability to evaluate our behavior change. People often set unrealistic goals for themselves. They've never exercised in their life, and then all of a sudden they're going to exercise 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week for the rest of their life at a moderate to vigorous pace, and they have no idea what they're doing. So setting yourself up for kind of defeat there, if that's your goal. We need to be smart in the way that we construct our goals and specific as to what it is that we're working for, and then use that. And the more systematic we can make this process, the better. The more specific we can make this process, the better. All of us have been exposed to this in the past, but I'd like to point out one thing that has been recently added to this idea of SMART goals, and that's this C, SMART C goals. Challenging. Setting a challenging goal that challenges you to get out and meet this goal is going to be really important for a lot of reasons. It's going to push you. It's going to create a desire. It's going to also strengthen your self-efficacy. We talk about self-efficacy. Many of us have probably heard of that before, that concept. Basically, our situation-specific form of self-confidence to achieve, to enact, so forth. The more we complete challenging activities, the greater that this sense of efficacy is going to be, and the greater that our ability and our belief in ourselves is going to be for maintenance, for future behavioral action, etc. So focus on setting a realistic but challenging goal that aligns with what it is that you're trying to do. I'm going to exercise every day to reduce my LDL cholesterol by 5%. And then this gives us benchmarks to evaluate against as we go forward. And then in line with this, goal setting is always going to be an iterative process where we set a goal, we behave, we evaluate, and then we adjust as needed after the evaluation period. So, that could be in the form of increasing the amount of physical activity we're getting. That could be look very different depending on the behavior in question, and how frequent it occurs and how long it needs to sustain, if we're talking about single instance versus repeat behavior, etc. And then based on our goals, we need to have some form of an action plan. We've all heard people don't plan to fail, but they fail to plan. We've heard that before. And as explicit and as detailed as the plan is, might not be as important as just having one. So you know you need to exercise because your doctor told you need to lose weight, you're pre-diabetic, etc. More than just saying I'm going to exercise. Put together the details and the structure of that plan. What does that look like? What am I going to do for exercise? There's a million different things that I can do. Find something that aligns with what you enjoy. Find something that is realistically, under your volitional control that you can actually go out and do. It's going to be very important. Next, self-monitor, reflect, and refine. So we need to self-monitor our behavior and our progress. So there's lots of ways that we can do this self-monitoring. Historically, research has utilized things like logs and calendars and diaries, those types of things, where we can make notes as to what's going on. The important thing is that we track our data. Successful people track and make data-driven decisions. And we hear that, in the scientific community nonstop. We're as good as the data. We need to make data-driven decisions. How do we know if we're succeeding? How do we know what went wrong? How do we know why we didn't succeed if we're not tracking? So there's lots of ways now with modern technology that we can use this technology to help us in our self-monitoring and our data tracking. There are millions of apps out there and websites and wearable technologies that can give us even biomarkers now. So this is a tremendous advantage. But as we track progress and monitor progress, it's really important to focus on things that maybe, went wrong, or so we can evaluate on the back end and see what went on here. Why did I fail to meet my objective? What can I do to learn in the process to make sure that this doesn't happen again? How are we doing on time? I need to rush probably, don't I? Get everybody out of here. All right.
Yeah, we're just past 12:30.
Okay. I'm going to blame it on a slow start time. I'm just kidding here. Here we go. So anyway, use those things to your advantage. One thing to focus on in your self-monitoring, consider how you feel as opposed to objective, biomarkers of the health issue. As you're monitoring, lots of times you experience a sense of well-being, sense of better psychological health, more positive affect, and et cetera, quickly, as opposed to reducing your cholesterol level a few months later. And this can be motivating to keep you going. Expect failure, expect relapse. These things are probable for most behavior. This has to be acceptable, otherwise it will defeat you. And then self-monitoring over time is reduced or eliminated depending on the nature of the behavior. Reinforce your own behavior. Most people don't do a good job at this. Why is it important to reinforce our own behavior? Because we're taking control. We have the locus of control inside us, and we're not dependent upon an external source of reinforcement. Thus, we can employ this reinforcement as needed to help facilitate our behavior change. Spend time examining your thoughts and feelings, because this is a tremendous source of reinforcement. Happiness, gratitude, the things that you feel good about yourself. These are so motivating and reinforcing of behavior, as opposed to some tangible things that may also be beneficial. When we start an exercise program, a way to reinforce ourselves might be, if I can stick with this for a month, I'll buy myself a really nice pair of running shoes or something like that, and having some goal in mind, but then also the reward in place. We'll go out to date night or something like that. Or if I spend time with my kids in physical activity every night this week, then we're going to go out for pizza as a reward or something like that. So reward yourself and figure out how to reward yourself. Successful people who change their behavior have an self-regulation capability of imposing their own reward system and not being dependent on others. If we're dependent on others, what happens when the external reinforcer is removed? Behavior ceases. It becomes extinct. So reinforce your own behavior. If all else fails, aversion therapy, as seen in A Clockwork Orange. And I'm being facetious. If you've seen this, it's very disturbing, but incredibly interesting scientific film. But if you do need help, as Aaron mentioned, there's resources available through this program where you can get counseling and coaching on specific issues. There is advice you can get from your doctor. Talk to someone because they can direct you to a health coach who can help you successfully change your behavior. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. I know we're a little bit over time, but did anyone have any quick questions?
Sorry again for running a little late there. I apologize.
It was definitely a lot. My question is, as the expert, there's obviously a lot of strategies and things to change and get us on track in changing our behavior. You mentioned maybe the environment, but do you have kind of a favorite thing to get started with that's either kind of low-hanging fruit or has worked best kind of in the evidence on where to start?
Well, I think, and if we're generalizing across behavior change, the knowledge is crucial. I put that purposefully as number one. You get so much out of actively engaging and trying to develop your own understanding as far as what's good, what's bad, what do I expect, where do I go for help. Building the knowledge base is so crucial because it highlights and leads you to some of these other things that we talked about as being so predictive of behavior change. Take ownership. So much behavioral theory revolves around the idea of humans as an agentic being who are able to impose their will and direct and dictate their own behavior. And if we can do things to allow that to happen, that is incredibly predictive of success.
That's a good answer since we're talking a lot about information and defend. So lots to learn, but there's also lots of, misinformation out there, especially related to nutrition and physical activity. So we have
right. I didn't get onto that, but as you're informing yourself, think about the credibility of what you're doing. If you're looking at things like how much to do, what actually to do, what is really going to fix my health issue, make sure you're getting that info from credible sources. And that we have so many government resources now that will have links to various information. The Department of Human Services and their website, the CDC, outside of the US, the World Health Organization, all of these big name things will point you in directions for credible sources of knowledge. And then anytime you can pull things from scientific literature that has been peer reviewed and published in scientific journals is going to be obviously a good source of information. It's not as easily digestible though. But from the non-credible sources, the experience of others. The great thing about being a human and having the ability to function here is that we don't have to experience everything on our own. And we can learn so much by reading, by talking, by having others serve as role models and learning about the difficulties and hurdles that they faced and how they overcame them. Vicarious experience and vicarious learning is a very powerful tool and a great thing.
Awesome. Anybody else have questions? And I will agree with changing your environment. For a while, I had a problem with jars of peanut butter, so I had to only buy single servings of peanut butter because otherwise I would just have trouble with a spoon and a jar.
Some of this, sorry, Aaron, I didn't mean to cut you off. Some of that seems so easy, right? It's like, I just need to remove this one thing from the environment, but also placing yourself in the right environment too. We do this from intervention standpoints, looking at, substance abuse and things like that. We try to enforce and require the need to cultivate this environment that facilitates success. At times it backfires, but almost everything that we do from an intervention standpoint, there's a reason why we're trying to utilize the environment and manipulate the environment. And public health in general, we're seeing behavior lesser and lesser from the individual standpoint and more from how do we cultivate the environment that facilitates what people need to do. Taking ecological approaches, based on the work of Yuri Bronfenbrenner years ago, to look at the individual as an element that exists at the center of this expanding ecosystem of influence. And the larger out that we can go to manipulate this environment or ecosystem, the greater impact it's going to have inwards to individual level behavior. So there's a reason why public health focuses on the environment. Such a powerful tool.
It is. Well, lots of great information. Dr. Davis's slides will be posted on the Defend website, and the recording will be posted on the YouTube channel. Anything else, Dr. Brown?
No, thanks. We only have 5 weeks left, so we're getting there. And I think it was great that we revisited SMART goals. So, you know, feel free to post in your Facebook, the Facebook group, how you're doing with your SMART goals and any successes or challenges you've had.
And you can add the C. That was something I learned today too. So
Yes.
how to make them challenging.
Got to increase our self-efficacy.
That's right. But thank you so much for your time, and everyone have a lovely weekend.
Thank you
Bye.
all.